So, Suz, welcome.
Terrific. Thanks, Ray. A very kind introduction, and welcome everyone to our webinar. The information in our webinar today is really what I'd describe as a collection of thoughts, if you like. And many of the thoughts are from my own personal experiences. Some are from my colleagues, and some are from my suppliers. And also, I've pulled together a bit of an amalgamation of some comments on the internet and social media. So, look, a little bit of stealing with pride as well, but I've tried to reference where I've done that. And look, in essence, I'm simply wanting to chat through the different points that really resonated with me when thinking about this topic. And that is both from my previous supplier perspective, but also now as a research buyer. So we've all heard the saying that clients prefer to work with people they like, and I think there is a whole lot of truth in that. However, I think it's also more a case, though, that clients prefer to work with people they trust. And so the trust is paramount. But look, if it's more enjoyable as well, then that's simply a bonus. So just like on a dance floor, if you're doing kind of more formal kind of dancing, a client needs to have trust in their partner. So I need to know that you know what you're doing, that you're not going to tread on my feet, you're not going to drop me or make me look bad. You know, I want to look good on that dance floor. So as a supplier, how do you go about building that level of trust with your clients? And I think importantly too is how do you even get onto your client's dance card and get that first dance? I know that can be a bit tricky. So we're going to talk through some of the qualities today that lead to a more enduring relationship. And also, you know, I will kind of tap into some of the common mistakes that I see happen along the way. So let's first talk about that pitch and how to get onto your client's radar. And look, not many people like cold calling it. It's a little bit like a blind date, isn't it? Certainly when I was on the supplier side, it was the last thing I really ever wanted to do. And in fact, most of the time, I didn't really ever want to call people that I knew and pitch for work. But look, nonetheless, it is a part of what we do, and it is necessary for a supplier. Clearly, you want to grow your business, and for me now as a client, I want to be aware of different approaches and new offerings that might be out there. So I think look, there are ways of doing a pitch that are not too jarring, and I think there are ways that definitely don't work either. So, well, certainly don't work well with me. For me, probably what I would describe as the pitch of the used car salesman, full of all that typical jargon, really is an approach that needs to be avoided. And it's pretty, I think it's pretty easy to see when someone's following, you know, just a clear kind of script. And I think as a client, it makes you ask the question whether they're really just trying to sell you some kind of pre-packaged solution to something generic. So I think going into these pitches that often the orientation is wrong, and the supplier can come across as more interested in just you know, getting their wares out on the table and telling us about their business rather than really wanting to understand our needs and what's going to help our particular business. So, you know, it's surprising how many pitches that I sit through as a client where I'm not asked any questions at all about the business till the very end. And some people come in and pitch and don't seem to understand any part of our business at all. So it's really important to do your homework and customise your pitch if you're doing a formal pitch. I think also too, there's the initial contact and how you go about doing that. You know, do you try and call the client, which usually means leaving a message because we won't be at our desk, or do you send one of those kind of unsolicited emails? You know, how do you even just make that initial contact? I think what's worked best for me over the years is when people do something a little bit different, so a little bit more innovative. I do spend a lot of time in the office, but I think something that comes in the mail beforehand often will catch my eye. So particularly if it's striking or it makes me laugh, and you know, then a follow-up call kind of makes more sense. It's kind of, we've almost broken the ice, if you like. The other one for me is just simply coming and having a coffee with me for a chat. So not so much a formal pitch, but rather just, you know, having a one-on-one conversation. And look, it's probably a bit individual. Probably different things work for different people. But if you're wanting to come and see me, just invite me out for a coffee and we'll have a chat. But look, here's a couple of ways that I would say you have the best chance of getting on a client's dance card. And I think, you know, we're a small industry. Word of mouth amongst clients is really big. You simply just ask around. And so I think it's really important to put effort into building a good reputation. So how do you go about building your reputation? For me, it's all about what you put in. So I would recommend any supplier speak at conferences, have a blog, get involved with the market research societies or committees. You know, whether it's SMR or AMSIS, Green Book, you know, whatever it is in your area, get involved. If there's accreditation schemes, get yourself accredited. Write stories, publish journal articles, use social media. You know, really need to get yourself out there, get noticed, in a good way, of course. The other thing for me is a supplier being able to show that they've stayed current, stayed relevant. So I would ask you, what kind of continuous learning do you do? What journals do you read? How do you stay current? How do you stay at the top of your profession? And it really is one of my favourite questions that I will ask suppliers. Once you have my attention, then I think it's really important to offer something that is a little bit different, but you need to understand what your point of difference is. So you need to be really clear about what you're offering and why I should take up that offer. Now, just in case anyone is questioning the benefit of a long-term relationship, let me just throw a couple of thought starters out there. I think we're about to head into a bit of an economic roller coaster again, particularly if you listen to our politicians. This, of course, is cyclic and will always happen. But during these times, there really is a tendency for client organisations to reevaluate their spend, you know, reduce the number of agencies, really consolidate down. So if you're in that long-term solid relationship, then you're likely to stay on the list. So there's definitely a benefit from that perspective. I think another change in recent years has been the involvement of procurement in streamlining processes. And they really are looking for mutual benefits, and that's value and volume to both the client and the supplier. I know sometimes it probably feels a bit like it's just cheap, but look, it's not. It really is about value and volume to both sides. So really important to strive for these long-term relationships. So what are the tips that I can give you for doing exactly that? For me, I think the first one is about being really clear what it is you're selling. You just don't claim to be an expert at everything. It just simply doesn't hold up. But I think you do need to understand whether you're positioning yourself as a generalist or a specialist. And so if I asked you what was your one big thing, could you tell me? Could you honestly tell me what is your one big thing? What is your niche? What are you really best at? How are you differentiated from other agencies? What is your research philosophy? I think they're really things that you should be able to answer without really much thought at all. It should be ingrained in what you do. And I think if you think about yourself, yourself as a brand, so both the company you work for and yourself really, be clear about what as a brand you stand for. Now this is one of my favourite slides, and those on the phone that know me will probably guess why. It's a slide with a cat in it. Now I try and hide a cat in every presentation that I do, so if we're ever in a presentation again in the future, just look out for where the cat is. You'll find one. But look, essentially this slide is saying, you know, don't bullshit. You know, sell yourself, yes, but be honest, and above all, just be yourself. I think genuineness goes a really long way, and I think above anything else, it has the ability to build trust and rapport very quickly. It's really, really important. So be honest about what you do, the size of your organisation, what your capabilities are, whether you outsource or you do things internally, you know, whatever the circumstances. I think, to be honest, if you don't feel you're the right agency for a particular project too, this kind of openness and candidness, again, really builds trust, and you'll earn a lot of kudos for that. And it's sometimes a very difficult thing to do, to turn away a project, but that's a much better thing to do rather than maybe take it on with the risk of it going pear-shaped, and certainly there's no kudos there. Now, as we mentioned, people do tend to do more business with people they like dealing with, and I think as suppliers, if you like your client, you tend to go above and beyond for them. And I know I did. When I was a supplier, there are a couple of clients that I was particularly fond about, and I would work all hours into the morning just to get stuff done for them. And I think it's simply human nature. So you're more likely to take a call rather than get the receptionist to say you're at another meeting, you know, all of that stuff. And just quietly, we do that on the client side too. So I think it's actually important to have some level of what I would call client-supplier matching. So it's kind of a bit back to the dating analogy. You know, sometimes different personalities simply don't gel well together, and no one's to blame. It just, you know, there's no chemistry. There's kind of no warmth. So I think if you're in charge of a team, that it's a good idea to let your staff know that if they don't think they're connecting with a particular client, you know, after some effort, of course, then maybe it really isn't the account for them to manage, and no fault, just not a good match. And I think if I was running a supplier agency, I would be absolutely looking for those synergies, and you'll have a better business if you do that. Okay, pricing. Now, as a client, we have our own internal clients here, and sometimes we can be put on the spot internally about, well, how much would this type of research cost? You know, when would we have the answer by? And people wanting some detail. So we really internally need to be able to estimate or predict the cost within a certain kind of ballpark. So that means we need to understand what the variables are, typically what's included, not included. You know, is there a face-to-face presentation included? Does it include a report, transcripts, coding of open-enders, etc., etc. and even more critical if it happens to be a competitive or comparative quote. And look, I know there's always trade-offs between cost and delivery of what you get. And look, it's not always the cheapest quote that a client's after. Sometimes it is. But certainly not always. So I think there's a really necessary conversation to have up front where I would let you know whether we're really after kind of more the Rolls-Royce or a Holden to this particular project, depending on the importance it has within the business. So clearly, as an agency, you have to make a profit, and your clients want you to make a profit. They want you to stay in business. But I know that it's often said that clients are notorious for having a champagne taste on a beer budget. But look, I think it's really about having it all clear, all sorted, and some openness and clarity to how pricing is done. Okay, this next one's fairly self-explanatory. Clearly you just need to know your stuff, whatever that is, whether you're specialist, generalist. And if you're truly after a long-term relationship, the more you can use your knowledge and understand your client's business and the implications of the research finding, then the more integrated you're going to be in your client's business, and the more integrated you are, you're kind of there for the long run. Now this one's just a quick one on flexibility, and look a little bit on kind of the black box solution as well. Now, some of you will work for a business that has proprietary products, others of you won't. But look, regardless of the type of agency that you work for, you need to always have some level of flexibility and alternative, and you need to be able to really explain why a certain approach is best. So never try and retrofit a solution to your client's problem. The last thing we want to see is something that looks a bit like a cut and paste or a bit of a push to kind of make it look like it's answering the questions. If you're already in a long-term relationship with your client, I think my counsel would be if all your proposals start to look the same, you need to kind of ask yourself whether or not that you may have become a little bit complacent. So I think there's something around flexibility and options kind of ongoing. Now, this is another one of my favourite slides because, interestingly, not enough suppliers do this. What I really like to see in a research partner is for them to challenge me. Question me, challenge me, question, hypothesise, really pull things apart. Now, I can be sitting here thinking, well, I may be the best bubblegum blower in Australia, but it does not mean that I know everything. We need to be challenged. And I think just as a supplier might get a little complacent, as a client we can get a little bit too comfortable too, particularly if we've been in the role for some time. And look, maybe we'll just trot out a similar brief to last time. But what we really need in that really true partnership is someone to challenge, give us a different perspective, and this really can drive fresher ideas and new ways of doing things. So really never be scared to challenge. I mean, the worst thing that can happen is your client will still just want their original idea. Okay, managing expectations, essential to building strong relationships. And I think we probably all agree that this is pretty much just a hygiene factor. So as a supplier, you need to manage your client's expectations, and as a client, I need to manage my internal stakeholders' expectations. So if you underdeliver, so do I, and that does not lead to a happy relationship. So just a hygiene factor. Okay, the other, probably again self-explanatory and kind of related, don't overpromise and underdeliver. If you're late, then I'm late. I think If you discover an issue, it's really important to let your client know as soon as possible, because we're really going to be in the best place to help prioritise. So if it's a bigger project, perhaps we can delay certain parts of the analysis or reporting. We might say, look, forget writing a report, a glossy presentation. You know, it's all about communication. So if something's not going right, communicate. And so communication, of course, is key. So communicate openly, clearly, do it often. I really like to get regular updates on projects, even if it's a quick text or, you know, a one-line email. And particularly larger projects that go on for some time, or a project that might be a new method, or method for me, not a new method entirely. So trying something new can be a little bit scary. Great to just have kind of regular updates. And I would encourage everyone to communicate warts and all, but only when those warts make a difference, because there is such a thing as over-communicating as well. So I don't want to sweat the small stuff. That's for you to work through as the project manager. But certainly I want to be kept in the loop here. In terms of the way you communicate, I would actually recommend you ask your clients what works best for them. Some will prefer the phone and others would prefer email or texting. I personally love a chat on the phone, but I know I'm really bloody hard to pin down, so sometimes an email or a text at least ensures that I get the information and we connect. Something to consider for your clients is a single point of contact. Now, I think this really does help to build the relationship. So if you've matched your client and your supplier well, and there's warmth and a bit of, you know, chemistry happening, then having that one person and single point of contact can reduce ambiguity or misunderstandings that happen in some multiple communications. And I know it's not always possible to do this. It's certainly, I'm just trying to think of some of my suppliers where the business is set up with account directors or a technical salesperson who doesn't actually do the research. I think in that case then you probably want you know, the two contacts, but I would certainly recommend keeping the point of contact to preferably one, if not, you know, two. And I think it works the same way for a supplier too. I think it's far more difficult if you have to deal with multiple people on the client side as well. Again, more chances for misunderstandings or ambiguity, unless they're separate projects. So we certainly try and do that sort of one point of contact here as well. Now, follow-up. Responsiveness is really, it's a biggie. It's really important. And look, I'm probably being just a little bit cheeky here, but if you want a long-term relationship, don't act like a one-night stand. Be responsive, follow up. So, you know, sometimes you do get a lot of responsiveness when someone's trying to win your business, and then that dwindles away with successive projects, and that's something that you really don't want to do. The other thing is, if you're dealing with one person and you give them the work, then you kind of don't see them to the end and they delegate everything to someone, entirely to someone junior. So again, not a great way to kind of build that relationship. At the end of a project, you know, I encourage you to ask for feedback, and look, it probably is something that you're already doing. So you might ask your clients whether you've met their expectations, was there something you could have done better. But I would put a challenge out there, and I would say, well, look, how often do you actually call your client 1 month later, 2 months later, 3 months later on that particular project and ask, how is that new product going? or how was the information used in the business? Did it make a difference? It's kind of that that real investment and showing that you're truly interested that will take your relationship to that next level. So as a client, certainly internally in my business, I have my own clients, I have my internal clients, and I have my stakeholders. And if there's one thing you take away today is understanding that ultimately I feel it's my butt on the line if a supplier does a poor job. And if you think about it, after all, I chose you, I briefed you, I partnered with you, I went through the whole debrief process. If you're crap, then I've done something wrong. So internally, I'm going to be held just as accountable as the supplier. Well, probably more so, actually. So we really do both have skin in the game. And one of the things that a client needs a supplier to do is make them look good. It's just like you need to make your boss look good, you need to make your client look good. Okay, no surprises. Not ever, never, never. No one likes surprises. I only want surprises on my birthday, not my work day. So keep us in the loop. Simple as that. And look, I think it's one reason why most clients will push for a final research deck a couple of days before the due date. It allows us to go through it, catch anything that might be, a red flag, talk about how, this might create some politics. The debrief is the last place that you want any surprises at all. And look, I mentioned politics, and yes, there's sometimes a little internal politics that we have to deal with. And look, I think it's inevitable, really. You've got different people, different perspectives, and this kind of internal politics, it can happen throughout the research, so maybe in the viewing room of focus groups, or certainly on the day of the debrief. Look, either way, it needs to be managed, and your client is the best person to help you understand what those internal politics might be. And look, particularly if it's a project that's got a huge impact for the client's business, so how do we best influence and present those facts in the most impactful way that we can? Now, part of a long-term relationship is truly understanding each other's role, and I think, look, what I'm about to say you may find a little controversial, and of course it is a generalisation, but I believe that clients who've worked on the supplier side probably make better clients, and suppliers who have had a stint on the client side potentially make better suppliers. Doesn't mean you have to do that to be excellent, but why would that occur? I think it's all about the understanding. It's all about putting yourself in each other's shoes and truly understanding, what are the issues that each of us needs to deal with. Yeah. So I wouldn't say that the grass is greener on the other side. We just have kind of different conditions to contend with, and the more you can understand what impacts your client, and then as a client, the more we can understand, the impact of longer questionnaires, or how exhausting it is to run groups night after night. The better we can understand each other, the stronger our relationship will be. Okay, so if you're setting your sights on a true partnership, I think it's really about looking longer term, acting longer term, not just treating projects as individual projects, but really getting in there and understanding your client's business. So it's a pretty simple formula, really. So you've put all of these efforts in and you have a lovely loyal client. You don't want to lose them. So how can you make them feel valued once you have them? Now, I'm not talking rewards such as presents or bottles of wine. Certainly no gifts of wine in New South Wales at the moment, thank you. But look, there are lots of other ways of providing additional value and showing that the partnership is appreciated. And I think one of the best ways you can do to add additional values is to share that knowledge that you have. So have you been to an interesting conference? Do you have papers you could share with your client? Have you read an interesting journal article that might benefit your client? Have you come across a new approach that might be beneficial? Perhaps you could give a talk to a group of people at your client's work, whether it's on a particular type of consumer or an emerging trend. What can you do to grow knowledge? Is there a way that you can make life easier for your client? Maybe it's a way of accessing all your past projects and using that data for knowledge building. Maybe creating a database for them. Are there ways that the two of you can innovate together? Can you pilot new ways of researching, new methods? Can you co-create and run brainstorming sessions together? Think of all those additional ways that you can add value to the relationship, and this really is the best reward that you can offer your clients. Now, the next 7 slides are all about the importance of the actual presentation or debrief in the client relationship. Now, often weeks and weeks of your work is boiled down to a 1-hour time slot with your client and their stakeholders. 1 hour, maybe 2 hours if you're lucky. So you really need to make sure that those 2 hours are fully buttoned down and you absolutely nail it. Really, really critical. Now, I actually presented this information last year in a separate session. So how to deliver a top-notch presentation. And look, I believe the deck and the recording is still available on the website. So I won't go into all the detail, and look, you have it here to read in any case. But I did want to just talk you through the main threads, because as I said, I think the presentation, the debrief, is so critical because that's when you've got everybody in the room. Yeah. So the first slide here, look, it's a couple of quotes on what a client and a supplier might be thinking walking into a debrief. And look, I'll let you read these at your leisure. They really are quite insightful. And again, it's about putting ourselves in each other's shoes and truly understanding, what might be pressing our buttons. Okay, hygiene factors. Never sexy, nor are they particularly interesting, but you don't want these routine kinds of things to detract from your presentation. So really important to be on time. In fact, be early. Ask your client if you can set up well ahead of the time of the presentation starting. Nothing worse than having a full room of senior people and you're still trying to get your connection to work. Make sure your equipment works. Have a checklist. Bring spare bulbs. Bring an extension cord. Just be prepared, really. Be a bit of a Boy Scout. And I would personally just do a bit of a caution on multimedia. I think there is a tendency to overdo it, and for me it's a bit like perfume or aftershave. A little goes a very long way. Now, as a researcher, it's important that you are across all the detail in the presentation, because this really goes to your credibility. Yeah? You've got to show that you're prepared, you're prepared for questions. So to that point, you must have done a lot of the questioning and hypothesizing yourself beforehand. And again, this is where your partnership with your client will really help. So share draft decks, go through it all, make sure you understand what the impact's going to be. And I think in that way you really need to think a little bit more like a journalist, look at all the facts and then pull together a compelling story. Now, I would definitely advise you to involve your client in the debrief early on. And as I said, give them early drafts to comment on. We know the audience, we know the hot buttons, and I think we'll really be able to make sure that the debrief resonates, yeah? And you want the debrief to resonate. You want people to go away with a really clear picture of what the findings are and the next step. So that goes to the clarity of your thoughts and making sure that your debrief is very much solution focused, not just data focused. So whilst you're preparing your presentation, for me, the biggest thing to ask yourself, or perhaps your client, is have you actually answered the objective of the research? So being clear about what message you want to get across to your audience is going to help you craft your entire presentation. It creates a thread, it creates a story. So tell a story and inspire. And tell the story in a compelling way so that those take-out messages truly are remembered. And again, this is another time to be real. So be conversational, be a real person, be natural, deliver your presentation, don't just read it, be careful of jargon, make sure that you're using everyday language, and your client will love you for it. It's just so important to get that session right. Now, lastly for me on the debrief piece is what I call the so what test, yeah? And I think sometimes we can forget that the client needs to make a business decision from this work. We don't just do research for the hell of it. We have a business decision to make. And you need to leave your clients with very actionable recommendations, but recommendations that make sense in the context of their business. Yeah. So the more you understand your client's business, the more you can make sure that it truly is a good recommendation for that business. So you need a call to action, and a call to action that is, that is relevant to that particular business. Now, we've just got a few minutes left before we go into question time. And I just want to quickly just talk about what to do when things go wrong, because they will. I think over the course of any long-term relationship, it is almost inevitable that things will go wrong. Yeah, there'll be some bumpy times. And why is that? Because we're not perfect. So the supplier's not perfect, the client's not perfect, neither of us are. And so our relationship will get tested, and it will get tested more than once as it goes, as the relationship moves from year to year to year. So one of my relationships I had with a client lasted just over 10 years, and we did have some times where things didn't quite work out well in field, or competitors responded to something before we even got a chance to get a debrief out. So how do you deal with these kinds of situations? I think it's really about how you respond, and really then it's how we both respond together. The main thing I would say is to get any issues on the table really, really quickly, and then we can see if we can work together to get the best outcome. I think it's always better to suggest a face-to-face catch-up, yeah, at these kind of critical moments. So I know myself, if I had to fly to Melbourne to have it, I would certainly do it. So it's around face-to-face, brainstorming and kind of navigating our way through whatever the crisis is together. But it does need to happen, you know, at the earliest time. And look, if everything else that we've talked about today is in place, then the relationship is more than likely able to weather the occasional storm. Yeah. So all of those other things in place, there will be some forgiveness. There will be some acknowledgement that no one's perfect. What can we do to fix this particular issue? And we'll move on from there. But that is why you look for those long-term strategic partnerships.